Hi, Charlie. Welcome to Tea Talks.
Hi, Belinda. Thank you very much.
So what tea did you bring with you for our chat?
Well, normally I drink Chinese tea, either Henpin, which is jasmine tea, or I particularly like the specialist teas. I like the black teas and the oolong cha. But at the moment I'm at my father's house, and so I don't have the facilities to make my Chinese tea, unfortunately. But anyway, cheers.
Cheers.
I shall miss it.
Cheers. Okay, so you are all about fashion. So I wanted to know, how did it start for you?
It actually started when I was a child at school. I think when I was about 11, 12 years old, and I did a foreign exchange with a Swiss family. So I went to Switzerland and lived with their family, and their daughter came to England and lived with my family. And whilst I was in Switzerland, my mum gave me some things to take to Switzerland for me to do in case, I was bored, which I was bored. And so one of the things she gave me was a game called Mix and Match, which is you have stencils. And so you have a stencil of a body and you have different colored paper, and you cut out the paper and stick it on the body. So you're making clothes. Okay, so it's like patterned papers. Anyhow, it was quite boring in Switzerland. So I spent most of my time making clothes with this colored paper, and then I left the colored paper and started designing my own clothes on the stencil. And then I very quickly just started doing my own illustrations, fashion illustrations. And so yes, and luckily, and I did hundreds. I was producing hundreds of designs. And then the Swiss family, the mother of the family that I was staying with, she had a sewing machine. And so she said she could sew. And so then she said, I'll teach you to sew. So that was the best.
Wow.
That was the best thing, because it was a whole summer. I was there for like 6 or 8 weeks. I can't remember now. So by the end of the summer, I had already decided, even at that age, that I was going to be a fashion designer. So then when I got back to England, when I came home after that and I carried on designing, my mum put me, she did some research and she put me in touch with a fashion designer, and who, well, actually it wasn't a fashion designer. She was a teacher at a fashion school. And she sort of like looked at some of my designs and said, you actually spend more time coloring in the patterns on your clothes than you do the actual shape of the clothes. So you should do textiles.
Oh, it's such a lovely story.
Yeah. So always,
really, really
I've never thought about doing anything else.
So you have extensive fashion experience, both here in the UK, but also in Asia.
Yes.
What I was interested to know is, how are those two fashion worlds different, and how has that shaped you?
Okay. The main reason I liked the Far East was because it's about manufacturing. It's about product development and manufacturing, not design. Okay. So you are the suppliers. You're working on the supply side of the fashion clothing rather than the design and buying side. And I was much more interested in the making of clothes and the making of the textiles and the making of the yarns, and getting to know the suppliers and how things were made. That was and it was much more exciting and innovative and technical and engineered, and with all of the equipment and machinery and processes. So I enjoyed that a lot more than just designing.
Okay.
So that's the big difference between the East and the West. The West is the creative, the designers, And that's what is mostly known in the West, but the East is mainly the making and the technologies behind the making of the clothes.
Okay. And so how did that shape your practice?
I worked my way up through from various different perspectives of the fashion industry, but always on the supply side. And that really gives you a huge advantage because you can completely understand design. So I would get sketches from the designers in Europe, from the fashion designers, and I would be able to interpret those and actually make a workable, commercial, cost-effective garment according to their design, and according to their budget and to their brief, which I always love that kind of a challenge. So that's the main part of my background. And then that led me into innovation, product development. So then I worked as a consultant for various companies that wanted to innovate their products. They wanted to create completely cutting edge, new, innovative products. And this was more long-term development. This wasn't a seasonal development cycle. So we weren't talking about autumn, winter and spring, summer. We were talking about, maybe 2 years to 5 years ahead.
Okay, wow.
And so that's when I started working on projects like, for example, bamboo and the development of bamboo as a textile. So I was in charge of the group of people that pioneered how bamboo was going to be processed into a textile fiber and used in textiles. So that was, and I've done many.
So very innovative.
Yes, exactly.
And also a great understanding of the whole entire process.
Absolutely, which I would never, if I'd have just stuck with being a textile designer or a fashion designer, I would not have been able to do that. So that has really informed, and also as part of when you are developing completely new technology or new textiles, you then have to work with the marketing team on how they are going to communicate these new things and what they do and why the customers should buy it, and also about the price as well. And so I started working a lot more closely with marketing and the marketing departments, and got a very good understanding of marketing. And really, product development and marketing go hand in hand together. Because if you create something new, you have to tell everybody about it. You have to tell the story about it, which is really important. Those are my two specialist fields, is manufacturing and supply chain, product development, and then marketing.
I've read that you started your own fashion label. Can you tell us about that journey?
I decided to start my own clothing brands. And at that time, this was in the late 90s, around the millennium, so around the year 2000. And
what made you want to start your own brand?
Because of course I thought that I could do something better than anybody else, and something that was different in the marketplace. So I focused on active leisure wear, and which was technical fabrics, but with a fashion twist. So,
which is actually very popular today.
Exactly. I was too early, Belinda.
You were very early, because now it's just gone crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So at that time, it was very difficult, because when I produced my designs, I produced my samples and my ranges, I did all of my marketing plans and business plans and everything, and then went round to department stores, because I wanted to sell in places like Harrods and Selfridges, because it was a luxury.
So you aimed high.
Yes, I aimed high, yes. But the problem was that when I met the buyers from like Selfridges or Harrods, they hadn't got anything like that, and they didn't know where to put it on the shop floor and where it would sit, because it wasn't sports and it wasn't fashion. And so the only thing that they had similar was Polo by Ralph Lauren. That was the only brand at that time that was a little bit similar. So so they wanted to put it, so I had suggested to put it next door to Polo Ralph Lauren, but then they didn't want to do that because I was an unknown brand name, you know, whereas Ralph Lauren and Polo was very well known. So they didn't want to take that risk. So then I decided, right, I'm just going to open my own shops. So I did it myself. So I opened my first store in Parsons Green in Fulham in London. And at that time in the late 80s, that was where all of the emerging active leisure wear brands started. So Fat Face started there, and White Stuff. And so we all were together on Fulham Road in Parsons Green. And we all kind of expanded together to Salcombe and Cowes and the different sort of like places where people went sailing and did all of these outdoor kind of luxury sports as well. But after a couple of years, I just found I was bored, I'm afraid. It lost its challenge. You're just a retailer, and I just lost the creativity. You know, it was all about selling and running a retail, running retail stores. So anyhow, I sold my brands and my business to the other guys that also started one of the other brands, and that's when I moved over to Belgium and started working for Levi's.
Okay. Interesting.
So that was yes. It wasn't too long.
And that's not a bad move at all to go and work for Levi's. So what did you do for Levi's, Charlie?
Yes. So I was brought into Levi's as a consultant to set up their ready to wear process. Levi's has always done its own manufacturing, and has so is considered a semi-vertical company, and they are all, from the whole process from design and making, they have done in-house. But they needed, because that's incredibly expensive to do that. And that's fine for the jeans and the denim, but in terms of tops for t-shirts, sweatshirts and knitwear, they can't open factories that can do every possible type of garment. It just was not feasible. So they brought me in because they really wanted to develop the tops business, so their t-shirts, sweatshirts and knitwear business and product line, but they had to do that in what's called a ready-to-wear process, and they didn't have people that were skilled in ready-to-wear. So I came in initially to start off the ready-to-wear process and set that up. So that was all fine, that was all successful. And then because I had done innovative textiles before, they then asked me to set up an advanced innovation team. And so so I did that, and to begin with there was 3 of us. It expanded over the years, but yes, we were looking at advanced innovation. So our first project was the ICD Plus jacket, which was a jacket with integrated electronic eyewear in it, and this was in 2004. So this was really, and we worked with Philips Electronics, and that jacket, the ICD Plus jacket, now is kind of like an icon jacket, because it's a vintage piece, or a museum piece rather, because there were very limited numbers that were made, but it was the first.
Did you get a copy? Did you have one?
Yes, I do. So,
amazing.
Yes. And then
what an amazing thing to be part of.
Oh, absolutely, it was. But it's a shame that, that was more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and wearable electronics in clothing has not really developed very much since then. And I think that's really
I always remember the store in London, Cyberdog.
Yes.
That store.
Yes, yes.
As a child, we used to go there, well, not as a child, as a teenager.
Yes.
You know, I
Yes.
just loved that store. It was fantastic.
Yes.
The
And
only
Betty
problem
shop.
was I found personally is that I remember buying some crazy trousers.
Yes.
And I never wore them. I never
Yeah.
wore them because it was just it looked amazing in, you know, in the neon lights and everything
Yes.
was lit
Yes.
up.
Yes.
For a club, it was amazing.
Yes.
But
Yes.
out and everyday wear,
No.
you looked,
No,
it was just, yeah, it just didn't go with anything. It didn't
no,
go.
exactly.
What
Exactly.
was I
Yes.
going to wear the trousers with? I found it very difficult to wear them.
Yeah.
But
And
it was
it's not
amazing to
particularly
see.
comfortable wearing, because our jackets were all wired up. So you could charge up your phone, you could charge up your MP3-4 player. You could, there was health detectors, so built into the clothing that could read your blood pressure, your heart rate. And
well, I guess that's where straight away I just thought of the Apple Watch. I mean, all of these things, that is wearable technology that's really taken off, not just the Apple Watch, but obviously
yes, a lot of, in terms of watches,
Fitbits,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes, but in terms of clothing and wearable technology and clothing, it hasn't really developed an awful lot. And then my next project was Levi's engineered jeans, LEJ. Do you remember those with the twisted seam?
Yes, I do.
Yes, yes.
I really remember those. I think I had a pair.
I think everybody did. So yeah, so we created.
I definitely had a pair, in fact. That's amazing.
Yeah, so that was really interesting project, because what Levi's wanted to do is they wanted us to look back in time at the very first jeans, denim jeans, and the problems with them. And of course, we're talking about, like, you know, 170 years ago, okay? And at that time, the problem with most trousers that were made of cotton was that when they washed, they skewed. When you washed them, they skewed. Whether you wash them by hand or later on, you know, when machines came out, the seams skewed and twisted. And this was a big issue because it made it sort of like uncomfortable. So, but we thought that that actually could become a design feature, and we could reinvent the jean with a purposeful twisted seam as a design feature. So I worked with a couple of the Levi's designers and we created this, and it was just an amazing success. But the biggest thing about that was telling the story, was the advert, the Odyssey advert. Everybody remembers.
I remember. I vaguely remember
the girl and the boy
advert.
running, and they are running in their jeans, and they're running, and then they break through the walls.
Yes.
And then they jump off the edge into space. I mean, that advert is an iconic, it's like the Levi's laundrette advert. And the Odyssey advert is also like an iconic marketing. So that was brilliant. I loved working with the
You must be so proud of being a part of those very iconic products.
Yeah. Yes.
What a thing to have been a part of.
Yes.
What do you need to make it? What do you need to be part of some of these incredible projects that you've been part of? Apart from the obvious.
Well, the main thing is that you have to think in a creative way. You have to have an imagination, think out of the box. You have to be really interested in product, and you have to be able to get a grasp of the technology. So the machinery, the equipment, the chemistry, and the technology behind how something is made. And you constantly have to question, what else could I do? How else could I do this? How could I improve it? How can I look back and take something from the past and bring it in to the contemporary times and redesign it and reuse it and remake it? So you're constantly thinking, and it's constantly a forward process as well. It's always like moving forward and developing and innovating. And so But you have to do everything so that it can be commercially viable as well. So it's not going to become a craft, because craft doesn't pay. So what you are looking for is something, a product at the end of the day that you can mass produce and sell all over the world, and everybody will love it at the right price. And that's my world. You have to understand pricing and how things cost, and what the consumer wants. So what the customers want, whether it's a buyer or a brand, or whether it's the end user, what the customer wants and needs, how much they would be willing to pay for it, and how to make it. That's and then that's the realistic part of the industry and the practical part of the industry.
Very much, Charlie. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Belinda.